Hello.
Technical difficulties right out of the gate. Hey everybody, we're happy to be here. We're excited to talk tonight with you all.
We've got a really good topic. Today we're talking about the problem with certainty. And this is, I want to set the stage for this a little bit. I think we can have really robust discussion. And as always, we love comments and questions. So feel free to jump in the chat if you are with us live, because we'd like to hear from you on this. So I want to open this up with a quote from the theologian Paul Tillich, Lutheran, German-American theologian. And he says, the opposite of faith is not doubt, it is certainty. So maybe we just open that up right there. What does that mean to you if the opposite of faith is certainty?
Well, I think that kind of goes against what we're taught as children and adults maybe.
Yeah.
We're taught in the church. And I definitely, for most of my life, thought if I didn't have faith, then I had doubts. Mm-hmm. I thought those were polar opposites from each other. And I didn't understand how you actually can have doubts and faith at the same time. When we talk about the opposite of faith being certainty, it makes so much sense to me now when I think, you know, if I know something for sure, that means I don't need faith anymore because I know it.
Right.
And I think it's helpful to look at probably one of the most famous faith scriptures, which is Hebrews 11:1.
Sure, yeah.
This is the NIV translation. And it says, now faith is confidence in what we hope for and assurance about what we do not see. And I really like those words that are used in that translation, because confidence of what we hope for being faith, it's not even necessarily in something, but it's a hope for something.
Right.
And that is very different than certainty and knowing something.
Right. Yeah, so I always thought of like faith as a spectrum, where like on one end of the spectrum is you have no faith, and then like some faith, and then like lots of faith, and then certainty at the end. Like as certainty being the end result of, you know, having lots of faith. And the other word that we use in the church for certainty is perfect knowledge. Mm-hmm. This is the term that comes up. That's the Alma 32 term for that, having a perfect knowledge. Like once you go all the way, then you have a perfect knowledge, and that's where you're trying to go. Now, there's some other things in Alma 32 when he's talking about a perfect knowledge later in the chapter. That's not really what he's talking about. He's talking about having a perfect knowledge of whether something is good or not when you kind of really read what he's talking about there.
So it's not something that he's saying you have to achieve this.
Right. Okay. Right. Absolutely. In fact, he says faith is not a perfect knowledge. Like that's, is that verse 21? Mm-hmm. He's very clear. Faith is not a perfect knowledge. That's not what we're talking about. So I want to throw in a different idea here, which is that faith implies the existence of doubt. If you have faith, that means there is doubt as well. And this goes with what you were just saying, which is, you know, and we're kind of used to this. This is kind of a Sunday school answer, but if you know something, then you don't need faith anymore. Like so that faith means there's a gap. Mm-hmm. And that means that for faith to exist, there has to be doubt. Doubt must exist for faith to exist, to say that kind of the other way around. And I think that's what faith is. It's acting in the face of doubt.
Huh. So I think that's interesting, because I don't think that is human nature to want that or to look for that.
Well, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because that idea, if faith implies the existence of doubt, that's uncomfortable.
For sure.
And humans don't want to be uncomfortable, right? So I found a quote from Diana Butler Bass, and this was a quote used on an At Last She Said It episode about certainty.
Oh, great.
And so she says, it kind of jumps into the middle of this story, but she says, the point was that she, the professor lecturing, complicated my view of faith and history. Complications challenge certainty. You don't have to go to graduate school to know that. We live in a complex world where at any given moment, a soundbite or a tweet from the other side of the planet can make you stop in your tracks and reconsider what you believe. Now, I think that is really interesting with what you said, because I think we're getting to a place in humanity where people do not want to be challenged on what they believe. They don't want to have doubts if they have faith, meaning certainty. They don't want to be challenged. They don't want to hear a tweet and reconsider everything that they believe.
Hence the social media echo chamber.
Yes.
I'm going to go to be surrounded by people that are saying the things that I want to hear.
And the confirmation bias, that's what they're looking for. And so I think when we say faith implies the existence of doubt, I think that brings in a lot of, I wanted to say uncertainty, but that
really,
it brings in a lot of fear for a lot of people, because they think, well, if I'm having doubts, then I'm falling away from church.
Right.
And that is not the trajectory.
Right.
And I think that's what we're wanting to point out, is that you are not on a trajectory out of the church if you start to have doubts about anything in your spiritual life.
Yep. I agree with that. And in fact, I'll go to Elder Holland to support this one, where he says, real faith, life-changing faith, Abrahamic faith, is always in crisis. That's how you find out if it's faith at all. Which is pretty cool coming from any LDS church leader to go that route and to say, I mean, again, and I'll shorten the quote, he says, real faith is always in crisis. That's how you find out if it's faith at all. Really punchy.
Yeah, because we never hear that part.
We don't say it.
General Conference, we've done an Instagram live about this, but testimonies and talks always want to tie things up in a tidy bow.
Yep.
And so having faith always be in crisis, what does that look like? How does that come out at church more authentically?
How do we get it to come out more at church?
Yeah. People don't want to share that.
It requires vulnerability, and that's just not something that we do in our meetings.
Not very well, at least.
So, yeah, I totally agree with that. I have one more quote on this, and this is from Rob Bell. Not LDS, but his podcast, the Robcast, is really great. He says, take faith. For many people in our world, the opposite of faith is doubt. Okay, so he's teeing that up.
Yeah.
The goal then within this understanding is to eliminate doubt. Now I'm going to comment after every sentence because that's exactly what you were just saying.
Yeah.
We've been trained, we've been taught as Latter-day Saints that our job is to eliminate doubt within ourselves.
Doubt is scary. Get rid of it.
Yep.
Don't go near it.
Yep. Okay. For many people in our world, the opposite of faith is doubt. The goal then within this understanding is to eliminate doubt. But faith and doubt aren't opposites. Doubt is often a sign that your faith has a pulse, that it's alive and well and exploring and searching. Faith and doubt aren't opposites. They are, it turns out, excellent dance partners.
I love that quote.
It's so good.
Yeah.
You may have heard that one quoted before. That's probably shown up in Leslie said it as well. They're big Rob Bell fans.
Well, you shared it in one of our lives here.
You may have heard that from my mouth before. Because I like it.
Yeah, it's so good.
And so he's really backing up this idea, one, that faith and doubt are opposites. And I love what he says about how doubt is often a sign that your faith has a pulse. And you could weaponize that really quick and be like, oh, well, people at church who, make a play of being certain about everything, their faith doesn't have a pulse. I don't think that's the right direction to go here. But I think if you're somebody who's having doubts, I'm somebody that, has doubts and has questions. And I love the idea that means my faith is exploring and it's searching and it's out there and it's alive and well.
Yeah. And it's like being enriched. I think that's what I've felt a lot lately, is that as I lean into the questions and the doubts and the uncertainty, I feel more enriched.
Yeah.
And there is some scary feelings, it is hard because we're not trained to know how to deal with this. We're not taught.
That's a good point.
With that.
And we don't really have a tool set to fall back on for that. And
so I think that maybe a lot of people who do struggle in the church at some point or struggle with their faith, that's maybe why it feels so scary, is because we've never been given the tools to work through that. We're just, like I said earlier, we're taught that if you start to struggle, you're headed out of the church.
Right.
And so why stay and work through it? And I think that we've lost so many wonderful people who are just unequipped. They don't know what to do. And so maybe I don't want to say the easiest way out is to leave, because it's not easy. That choice is never easy.
For sure. Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. We need to do better to help people understand what that faith that's always in crisis looks like.
Right. Well, and one thing that we do is we always say, I know.
Mm-hmm.
I know the church is true. I know this. I know that.
And not only I know, but I know with every fiber in my being.
Without a shadow of a doubt.
Yes. Like,
right?
We pull in these phrases that are like, there's no movement here. We are solid.
Right. We're conveying absolute certainty when probably we're not always that certain.
Right.
Sort of a thing. And so again, this isn't to look down on anybody who's saying, I know the church is true. There's even multiple ways to multiple meanings of I know, like, it doesn't have to mean I have a perfect knowledge. It has been, I have seen God and, these sorts of things. It doesn't have to mean that. And so, like, I don't want to be elitist and saying you can't say I know if you don't really know, sort of a thing. But I think the problem is what other people take from it when we say it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's where a lot of the harm comes, because if you are a child or a youth or something and you're hearing people say this, or even an adult, and you're saying, well, I can't say that I know that, so
right.
I must be broken. I must be doing this wrong.
Right.
And that couldn't be farther from the truth.
Yeah. Yeah. We go to church and we hear people say, I know this. And sometimes I don't know that.
Yeah.
What they're saying. And, what does that mean about me? Does that mean my faith is falling behind? Does that mean I've done something wrong? All of these sorts of things. So, we definitely have a culture that's pushing this idea of you have to be certain, instead of giving us tools for when inevitably we have questions and doubts, because everyone is going to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There is a book that fits so well into this, and it is Pete Enns' book, The Sin of Certainty.
Absolutely.
He literally wrote the book on it. So go read that book if you haven't. It's really, really good.
Yep.
I pulled a few quotes from that book. I think before I read this, I think it's interesting to know or to note that I believe it's the Greek word for faith that is used in the scriptures actually means trust.
It's pistis.
Yeah, sure.
I don't know if I'm saying it right. I don't speak Greek, but I'm pretty sure that's the word.
Yeah. So it means to trust. And when I put trust in place of faith, it looks different. I can get different things out of talking about faith. So Pete says here, when trusting God is central, so when having faith in God is central, trusting God, even the simple act of trying to trust him when we might not feel like it, we are walking a holy path. When we learn that it is okay to let go of the need to be right, that God is not going to pounce on us from behind the corner and give us a whipping, but actually welcomes this step of faith, only then will the debilitating stress of holding on to correct thinking begin to fade. Then we are giving control over to God, which is a more secure place for faith to rest than on the whims and moods of our own thinking. There's so many interesting things that we could take out of this quote.
Yeah.
I think the idea that we have to hold on to a certainty, to a knowledge, or God is going to pounce on us and make us feel bad for what we've done.
And I pulled out just, what popped out at me was, he says the debilitating stress of holding on to like being right.
Perfectionism.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that is probably harming a lot of members in the church, a lot of Christians in general.
For sure. That's where, scrupulosity and these kind of things come from. Like there's actual real mental health harms that come from this.
Yeah. And even if it doesn't go that far to be a diagnosed illness or something, I feel that debilitating stress sometimes to do something absolutely correct.
Yeah.
But I also love that he says, that Pete says, when we're giving control over to God, it's a more secure place for faith to rest than on the whims and moods of our own thinking.
Ooh.
And I think that's
so
interesting. Our own thinking is, it's not even necessarily what the church has taught or, what we have to know at church, but our own thinking gets in the way, and we have to trust in God, have faith in God. And that gives us more freedom to actually have a relationship with our heavenly parents. I think that's really beautiful.
Oh, that's really great. This kind of raises this idea that not only is certainty an unattainable goal, I'm actually going to go ahead and say that I don't think we can have certainty in this life.
Yeah.
And
I have never had a perfect knowledge of pretty much anything.
Right. And there are so many things that even if we, feel very certain about some things, you could grab like almost any gospel thing and we'd go, oh no, we're really not certain about that. You could say like, okay, we know our bodies are perfected when we're resurrected. What does that mean?
Yeah.
Not a clue. Does that mean, the bald man gets his hair back? Or, we don't know these things. And so having a perfect knowledge is unattainable, I think, in this life. But what I'm bringing up here is that it's maybe not only unattainable, but harmful, in some cases, to have this certainty mindset. And so I've got another quote, and this is a great one, because this is from Cardinal Lawrence.
I have a quote from Conclave. How did we both find a quote from Conclave?
We might have the same quote here. So this is from the movie Conclave, which if you haven't seen it, it's really, really good. A really great cast, a beautiful movie. So this is from Cardinal Lawrence, who's played by Ralph Fiennes, who is Voldemort. It's the same actor. So anyway, he has a nose this time, Cardinal Lawrence. But he says, over the course of many years in service of our mother, the church, let me tell you, there is one sin which I have come to fear over all others: certainty. Certainty is the great enemy of unity. Certainty is the deadly enemy of tolerance. And I was like, whoa, awesome.
I have just a little added part from that quote.
Okay.
If there's only certainty and no doubt, then there would be no mystery and therefore no need for faith.
Oh, great. That's even better.
Yeah.
Thanks for adding that on. But his comment about certainty is the enemy of unity. It's the enemy of tolerance. I think this is really interesting. I will add one piece to that from a church that values continuing revelation. I think if we have a certainty mindset, that closes us off to change and to revelation, whether that's personal revelation or, church-wide revelation. And, there's a handful of times in church history where you could really point to this, maybe 1978 with the priesthood revelation. And some people just didn't want to hear it because they were so certain about what they thought was the way things should be, that having new revelation, even from the prophet, was a little bit too much for them.
Yeah, it rattled them too much.
Yep.
I forgot what I was going to say. What was I thinking? You were talking about, tell me what you were talking about. Say what you just said again.
Okay, rewinding. So talking about the harms that certainty can cause.
Yes.
The enemy of unity, the enemy of tolerance, and then I think it closes us off to continuing revelation.
That's what it was, because I think that when we are so certain about something and we teach, you talked about certain parts of it, but let's look at even the 3 degrees of glory in the afterlife. You were talking about our bodies after we die, or after we're resurrected. When we talk about the 3 degrees of glory as this is the way and the only way, and this is what it will look like, period, then we know, we are putting a box around God and saying nothing else is possible. We're making God small. And I don't think that is, I don't think that's helpful to put God in a box and to make God small, because what does that do for us?
Right.
When we talk in such certain ways about things that we really don't understand and don't know, speaking about them in certainty just shuts every conversation down. It shuts down that personal revelation or revelation from a prophet. I think that's really harmful to stay closed-minded like that.
Yep.
Which is odd to say that it seems closed-minded when you are being certain, because you would think that means that you know so much.
You've arrived, right?
You've researched and you've studied and you learned, but it feels like you're actually very closed-minded.
Yeah. That's so so idiosyncratic. It just doesn't seem like that would be the way that works out, and yet it does. The feeling of being so pious shuts you off to even the whisperings of the Spirit, I think, in that case.
So here's a hot take. I don't know if it's gonna land.
Okay.
Let's
get it out there.
Yeah, this is just a controversial statement I'm gonna throw out there.
Okay.
I think that people who show up at church and only talk in certainties, I think they come across, at least to me, they come across as very shallow and fake. Because if we go back to that elder, was it who was it? Elder Holland. Yeah. Elder Holland quote, that real faith is always in crisis. If you show up and you are not showing any of that crisis and you're not talking about a journey or anything like that, it seems very fake to me. Like you're just putting on a show. You're not deep. You're not vulnerable. And I do not want to think that about people. That is, that's something that I will work on, to not judge people in that way. Maybe the better way to say it is I value the vulnerability. I value seeing the process and the journey rather than the tied up bow at the end.
Nice. Way to circle back around to having grace on that one. But I don't disagree with you from a personal perception perspective.
Yeah.
That, being someone who is exploring and trying to understand more, and somebody goes, nope, I've locked it all up, that's really challenging. But at the same time, none of us is in a position to judge somebody else's faith, and we've got people at other faith stages. We talk about these stages quite a bit. And a characteristic of someone in stage 1, simplicity, the way Brian McLaren describes it, is going to assert that certainty.
Yeah.
That's what their testimony is all about, is I've got this locked down. There's the good and the bad. I chose the good. I'm in the right camp. I'm there. I've arrived. And so there's explanation behind why people are going to approach the gospel that way and talk about the gospel that way. That doesn't mean I don't perceive it a certain way.
Well, and to me, it seems that approach seems so shallow because they're just given 2 choices and they choose one, and there's no growth period. But that is from an outside perspective. I don't see that growth period. I'm not.
Oh, fair. Yeah.
I'm not in their life. I don't know what their experiences are. It's just when they speak that way, that's how it comes across often.
Yep. And
so that is where the grace for understanding their faith stage does come in, where I don't want to judge them, and I want to have faith. I mean, I want to have grace for where they're at, even though it's not the approach that I will take to stuff.
Right. And it always comes back to, I want them to have that same grace for me, whether they will or won't.
Right.
That's a different question.
Yeah.
But I should at least try to afford them what I want for myself.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So maybe the question is, where do we go from here? If certainty is not attainable and not the right approach, and I'm just going to ask you this question. Okay. What should be our mindset when it comes to ever developing, ever evolving faith?
Well, it's my favorite phrase that I love to say is grace and space.
Yep.
We've already talked about the grace for people wherever they are, but I also think we need to give space to people for the time that it takes to figure out where they're going and figuring out what their faith means to them. I think if we say, you have to believe this thing to move on in this way, and your testimony has to be this tall. There's that quote from Uchtdorf about that. I think that does a lot of harm for people that are in that wiggle room and in that liminal hallway where they're trying to figure stuff out. They're in between. We don't make space for the in between.
Yeah.
When I think that most of us live there.
I think
we
so.
all, whether we have a trouble or a problem or not, it's going to show up tomorrow or the next day or,
Right.
and so we're all going to be in that liminal hallway at some point. And so why don't we make more space for that?
I love that. And I'll add one angle to that, which is grace and space for yourself
Yeah.
in that. Because those times are hard and they're challenging. And sometimes it's not just certain times, but it's ongoing.
Yeah.
I pulled this quote from Tyler Johnson's book, When Church is Hard. He says, "We should expect times when it seems God goes silent. It appears to be part of the path of discipleship, or maybe just a fact of spiritual life. The ashes of our previous certainty may fertilize the ground from which a new, more mature, more nurturing, more compassionate, and abiding faith to grow." So that gets a little heavy on the metaphor, a little more poetic there. But the ashes of our previous certainty, because that certainty does get burned down.
Yeah.
And that's what Richard Rohr talks about in Moving to the Second Half of Life. And Brian McLaren talks about in Stages of Faith. And it's well documented everywhere else and just not talked about much within our faith.
Well, and it's interesting because even stories in the Bible, they don't show people with a perfect knowledge.
Oh, nice.
Pretty much every story in the Bible is somebody that's working through it and trying to figure stuff out. And so, like, if we're supposed to be studying the Bible and patterning our lives after things, learning from the stories and whatever, why do we expect to just know it all and not have this fertilized ground that we're living in? I mean,
Right.
I think that's beautiful. I think that's such a great image of kind of a phoenix out of the ashes of new things can rise. When we let go of that, what was the debilitating stress of certainty.
And now you've got my mind turning on scripture stories. Like Jonah is an easy one to pluck out of the Bible.
Job also.
Yeah, for sure. You could go to the Book of Mormon. Start right at the beginning with Nephi, who is kind of stumbling over a few things, and even going to that whole "oh wretched man that I am" sort of thing, talking about his sins and how imperfect he is, and how he's struggling with all of these things. And we do have example after example after example through the scriptures. Yeah, that's really well said. I really appreciate that.
There was something else I was gonna say. Oh, so after we decided on this topic, I was just moving about doing things, and I turned on today's episode of At Last She Said It that dropped today.
Awesome.
And they were kind of talking about some of this in a roundabout way, but they kind of started it because a woman had said in one of their events that they were at, a woman said that she just is not a spiritual person, a person of faith anymore, because her faith looks different than what it was growing up or whatever.
Okay.
And I think that that's the harm when we say your faith has to look a certain way, or you have to be certain, and you have to know. We have this, like we were saying, this testimony way of speaking, of knowing things are true. That when you don't follow that path or that mold, then, as this woman said, she said, well, I must not be a woman of faith then.
Right.
I must be broken. I must be doing it wrong.
Okay. Yeah.
And I think that's where the harm comes and I kind of said this earlier, is then if you think you're doing it wrong and you show up to church and people are, all saying the same thing, and you're like, well, what's wrong with me? I guess I don't belong here anymore. And then you step away. If we were to make space for those struggles and exemplify or show a different, like, this is what sister so-and-so's faith looks like, and this is what sister so-and-so or brother so-and-so, nice, and we show these different stages of faith and different ways that people are living their lives and trying to figure stuff out. Then when you aren't, then there's not a mold to fit, because it's just a myriad of things that you could do. But when you don't feel that you fit in, you're not going to feel that, because there's space for you to explore, to really figure stuff out.
And we've talked in a previous episode, a previous Instagram Live, about vulnerability. And sometimes when you are vulnerable yourself, it makes room for other people to be vulnerable as well. And that really opens that up, kind of breaks the mold open a little bit so that other people can fit.
Yeah. Oh.
Oh, I have a quote that I was kind of saving for the
Okay.
end. So do you want to
No,
jump in
do
before
your
that?
quote and then I'll say my thing.
Okay. So this comes from David Hawkins in his book Letting Go, which is actually not a religious book. But I loved this quote and how, like, man, talk about a punchy quote.
Okay.
So here it is, and I liked the message in it as well from a theological and spiritual standpoint, even though that's not what the book is about. He says, "O God, save us from the ones who have the answers. Save us from the righteous. Save us from the do-gooders. Confusion is our salvation. For the confused there is still hope. Hang on to your confusion. In the end, it is your best friend, your best defense against the deadliness of others' answers. If you are confused, you are still free." And so there's a lot of talk about being confused in there and that sort of thing. And that's maybe not the word that I would have chosen, but being open-minded, knowing that more answers will come instead of being locked into that certainty.
Yeah.
And so when he's saying that you're still free, it means, yeah, your faith is still growing and exploring and seeking, and it's active and it has a pulse. And so sometimes being the one with the answers is just not what we need to be.
Yeah. Yeah, that goes back to the Hebrews 11:1.
Yep.
Faith is confidence in what we hope for and assurance about what we do not see.
Yep.
So
Awesome. Okay.
So
take it away.
We wanted to, before we end, we wanted to just have a little announcement. So we did some polls a few days ago on our stories about our Instagram lives, whether they're helpful and, people are finding good things from these, and you all answered that you are, so thank you. We're excited about that.
Yeah.
But we understand that these 30-minute Instagram lives are hard to watch, and you can't do other things while you're doing it sometimes or whatever.
Because it's on Instagram.
Yeah. So what we have decided to do is we are going to continue doing them on Instagram, but we will upload them to YouTube and Spotify and Apple Podcasts and
wherever else you get podcasts, all the
things.
Podcast places.
Yeah. And we are they're going to live under a name because we have our two accounts, the Vision Beautiful and From the Overflow.
Yep.
And so we wanted to come up with a name for the ease for looking these up. So do you want to tell them what our name is, what we've decided?
Yeah. So when it goes out on YouTube and as a podcast, it's going to be called And Yet We Believe. And that kind of goes right with our topic today about faith and certainty and so in the face of, it could be doubts, it could be challenges or other struggles, despite those things, and yet we believe. And so we think that really encapsulates kind of what our message is in doing this together as Latter-day Saints who have questions, but are choosing to stay.
Yeah.
So that's the good news. If you've been watching this on Instagram, next time you can be listening to it on Spotify or watching it on YouTube or whatever works best for you.
Or on Instagram too,
It'll still be on Instagram. You can still find it here. And we'll still be doing these live. And so if you want to join and comment and be a part of the discussion, that's really enriched these discussions, I think, to have good comments. So please feel free to keep joining live.
Yep. So we'll put all of our past videos up as well once we get those all downloaded and formatted correctly. We'll get them up.
We got to figure out the technology.
Yeah, and then we'll start putting them up each week. So hopefully that is good news for everybody that's listening.
All right. Well, thanks so much. We appreciate all of you. And we will see you next time. We did just get a question. Will this episode be on YouTube? Absolutely.
Yep. We'll put it up.
Yep. And it might take us a few days, but we'll be getting it up soon. So keep an eye out for that.
Yep. Thanks for joining us
tonight. Thanks, guys. We'll see you later.
Bye.
Bye.